use. So when we talk about the specific areas of market entry strategy, we can use your real businesses as kind of examples to illustrate how to do this. Is anybody running a business?
Lihat di depan rumah itu.
If not, it's okay. We can still discuss. I would like to be a bit interactive. I know that there's a lot of students in the session, so maybe the best way is through the chat. But if you want to raise your hand and ask a question or make a comment, it's okay. Or just unmute and speak. We'll try and. It's a big session, but we'll try and treat it like a small session. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay. So I'm talking about market entry strategy, like what you should do if you want to take your business and enter into a new market in a new country. What kind of steps should you take? So it's at a very high level. I'm not going to talk about kind of low level decisions that you need to make, like should I do direct export or should I do a joint venture? Those kind of questions. We're going to stick to very high level conceptual strategy. I'm not going to talk about Indonesia or the market condition in Indonesia, or why someone from abroad would want to enter the Indonesian market. I'm going to keep it very conceptual and very high level. So hopefully that fits with what you're looking for. So when I teach this class about market entry strategy, I always start with the question about what is strategy? Because a lot of students and a lot of businesses just take it for granted what strategy is. They think that they know, but when they really ask this question, they don't have a good, clear answer. So what do you think strategy is? What is it about? Maybe you can share your ideas in the chat. Not just about business strategy, but just strategy in general. Do you have any ideas? So a game plan. That's a good answer from Ken. Any other ideas? So plans are important. A way of doing something. Steps, plan steps to achieve a goal. Any other thoughts about what strategy is about? Safety bars for doing something risky. Yeah, I think managing risk is a very important part of strategy. A method to execute a plan. So yeah, the method is important. The best way to achieve our goal. Yeah, so goals are important. Methods, steps, action plan to be taken to achieve a goal. Good, these are all really good answers. So we've talked about plans, we've talked about actions, and we've talked about goals. So which of these are strategy? Is strategy about the plans? Is it about the action, or is it about the goals? So really, I think, yeah, it's about the plans and the actions simultaneously. Yeah, so I think we spend a lot of time on the plans, but really when we talk about strategy, it's all of these things. And so first you have to start with the goal. You have to set a goal. If you don't know what your goal is, you can't make a plan to achieve it. So the first step is always about setting what your goal is. And this is what makes strategy confusing. So at Venus, I teach like a 4-week seminar about business strategy. And we read a bunch of journals and we do a lot of discussion for 4 weeks just to answer this question, what is strategy? That's our whole goal, to get an idea about what strategy is. And it's hard because strategy is still not really well defined. There's still not agreement from academics about what strategy is or what the goal of strategy is. So it makes it confusing, because if they don't agree on what the goal is, they can't really agree on the best way of doing it either. But when we think about the goal of strategy in business is usually about how can we be different from other companies? What can we do different? That's kind of the main goal of strategy. And we want to be different in a way that adds value for our customers specifically. But we want to add value, and we don't want other people to be able to copy what we're doing. So if we can be different from the other companies in the market in a way that adds value, and other companies can't just easily just copy right away what we're doing, we can get what is called sustainable competitive advantage. And that's really the goal of strategy. That's why we're doing this. So we can be different by having lower costs, or having a differentiated product, or by kind of addressing the specific needs of a niche market. So those are kind of the ways that we can differentiate ourselves. But if we can do that, and other people can't copy us easily, we have a good strategy. So with that in mind, we have to make our plan. This is called strategy formulation. This is what we're going to be talking about today. So we have a general idea of our goal, which is something that we want to start by thinking about, but we're not going to talk about today, because our goal is to be successful in a new country, about that. And we have our vision and our mission and our values of our company, and we want our goals to align with our vision and mission. And then we make our plans, and then we execute our plans or implement our plans. And we call it strategy implementation. So these are all parts of strategy. So today we're going to focus on the plans, mostly making the plan. But it's really important to keep the other things in mind as well, because if you have a bad goal, you're not going to be successful even if you make a great plan for that goal and execute really well. If the goal is bad, you're not going to do very well. If your plans are bad, it doesn't matter how well you implement them. And if your plans are great, but you can't get it done, it's not going to help you as well. So we need to be very good in all three of these areas of strategy. So usually when I talk about strategy for the first time, I think it's good to think of an analogy, because you're probably not running a business. You're not thinking about business strategy. So we want to think about something that maybe you're more familiar with and use that as an analogy for business. So I talk about something that most of us are at least a little bit familiar with. I always use the analogy of football. So when you play on a football team, you need a good strategy in order to win. They use strategy a lot. So what are the kind of factors for a football team in making a strategy? What are the factors that you have to consider that will affect your strategy? Does anyone have any ideas or experience with football? What are some of the things you consider when you make your strategy? The players. Yeah. So our players have certain strengths, things that they're good at, right? And you want to use their strengths. And our players also have weaknesses. We want to avoid their weaknesses. Budget is really important. The opponent also has strengths, and our opponent also has weaknesses that we want to attack their weaknesses and defend against their strengths. The level of competitiveness, okay. Whether it's home or away. So things like the field, you're gonna maybe have a different strategy if you're on a home field or you're a visitor. The place, the stadium, whether it's, I don't know if they do like a closed stadiums in soccer, but maybe if it's an open field or if it's a closed field is important, at least with American football, which I know more about. So the stadium is important. What about the weather? You're going to play different if it's raining than if it's sunny, than if it's snowing. You're going to play differently. Any other ideas? We have a coach, right? Our coach is really important. Sorry, I can't write today. We have a culture of our team, right? We have things like morale, which means if you're winning a lot, everybody's super positive. You're gonna motivate them in a certain way. And if you're losing a lot, then morale is going to be low. You're going to kind of take a different approach. The rules are important. If one of the rules changes, for instance, you're going to change the way that you play. You have things like the talent available. So players who are not signed to your team, but you could sign them at any time, right? They're important to your strategy. There's a bunch of these things. So we have a good list here. This is a more complete list. So the way that we can think about these factors is we can think about them as internal factors or external factors. And the internal factors are the things that are a part of our team, and they're things that we can control and that we can make decisions about. And our external factors is everything outside of our team that we don't have any control over, that we don't get to make any decisions about. We just have to accept them. So yeah, we have our players, what they're good at, what they're not good at. The equipment is important. Coaching is important. How much money we have, if we're a big, huge professional team, or we're just playing, in a field somewhere. The training that is available to us, the experience that we have. Injuries, of course, is going to affect our strategy. The schedule, whether it's the first game or the last game of a season, the culture, the morale, the ownership, all of these are important internal factors. And they're things that we can make decisions about, and we can change if we want to change them. Our external factors, we don't get to choose. So we have our opponent's strengths and weaknesses, weather, rules, talent available, the stadium, the fans, the field, the referees. All of these are important external strategies. So when we talk about strategy in business, we can think about it the same way. We can break it down into internal factors and external factors. So what are the internal factors that affect a business's strategy? Business is not that much different from football. The employees. So yeah, our employees are our players on our team. They have strengths, they have weaknesses. The cost is very important. So we think about our budget, our equipment is important, the technology that we have. What else? Rules. So the rules of business is like laws. So you have to follow the laws of the country you're in, and that makes the rules of how you do business. The office culture is very important. The culture of the country is very important. The product is very important. The competitors are very important. Capabilities. These are all really good answers. So we can make these lists again. If we think about internal, we have the employee capabilities. That's our players. We have our management, which is like our coaches. We have the technology and equipment that we have, whether we're a very high-tech production using robotics and AI, or whether we're very labor-intensive and low technology. It's going to affect our strategy. How much money we have to spend, our experience, training, just like a team, how we manage human resources, our brand, whether we have a very well-known brand or unknown brand, is going to affect our strategy, marketing, culture, morale. So these are all things that we can control and we can make decisions about. We can make the culture that we want to make. We can hire the people that we want to hire. We don't have control over the external factors like our competitors. Sorry, I got things blocking it. The laws, the country culture, the economy, whether it's in a boom or a recession. The environment is very important. Customers, political situations, technology innovation, product innovation, suppliers, available talent is important as well. So these are all factors that help us make a strategy. This isn't strategy yet. This is just variables that go into making a strategy. So next, I usually spend some time to talk about what is analysis and what is analytical thinking and what is an analytical framework. I'm not going to spend too much time in the discussion because maybe you've done analysis in different fields and maybe not in business, but we do it the same way, whether it's international relations or whether it's business or whether it's science or engineering. We do analysis the same way. So what we just did a minute ago is that we just used brainstorming. So we thought of all of the factors that influence strategy, but how do we know that we included everything? How do we know that we're not missing something? How do we use what we found to make decisions? Because right now we just have the variables. If we collected all of the information about who our employees are and who our competitors are, we would just have data, but it wouldn't tell us anything until we analyzed it. So we use analytical thinking. And the important thing is that we take a big problem, like how do we enter a new market? And we try to make it into smaller pieces that are easier to understand. And then we can, make insights from. And we use analytical frameworks. So frameworks are really important because they give structure to our thinking. This is how we know that we're not missing something important or that we're not giving too much weight to something that's not as important. So we always come up with some kind of framework to input our data in and draw conclusions. And so these are usually coming from theories or maybe from evidence that we have or experience that we have. They can be very formal or informal. So what I'm talking about today, I'm focusing on some frameworks that we can use in order to make our market entry strategy. So yeah, all we're doing is taking data. What we had before, if we knew all of the information about our company and our competitors and our environment, it's just data. And we can put that into a framework like internal, external is a very simple way of organizing that data. But it's up to us to draw the insights and conclusions from that framework. How many of you have heard about SWOT analysis? So this is an example of a framework that's used in business strategy. Has anyone ever used a SWOT analysis before? Okay, Sandra is familiar with it. So it's pretty simple, right? And it's based on what we were talking about before. So it just breaks it down even further. So we have on the left side, we have our internal analysis. And on the right side, this is external. Oh, sorry, I messed this up. Sorry, the top is the internal. I'll fix it. I was going too fast. So the strengths and our weaknesses, this is internal. And our opportunities and our threats are external. So we look inside our company, we see what are our strengths, what are our weaknesses inside of our company. And we look outside of our company and say, well, what opportunities do we have and what kind of threats do we face? So SWOT analysis isn't perfect. From my experience, I think it's pretty good at a beginning stage to kind of brainstorm and get ideas out and organize information. But for me, it's not always structured enough to make really good decisions from. So you have to really think about what goes into each of these categories. And you can put in additional frameworks inside of these. So you can use things like the strengths and weaknesses. If you just ask like, what are the strengths and what are the weaknesses, you might be biased towards what your position is, or you might overvalue something that the customers don't value as much, things like that. So you can put in another framework like value chain analysis and look at every area of the business and figure out what the strengths and weaknesses are. The other thing you want to do is you want to be really objective and use a lot of data. So you can say, how does our ability compare to the industry average? And if we're above average, that would be a strength. And if we're below the industry average, that would be a weakness. What you don't want to do is you don't want to just think up what do you think you're good at and think up what you're bad at. We're not very good at self-assessment. So I had students before that were doing a thesis and using SWOT analysis, and they came back, they just asked the company, what do you think your strengths are? And what do you think your weaknesses are? And they came back to me, and one of the strengths was our employees are very loyal. That was the strength. And one of their weaknesses was our employees often steal from us. And so I just laughed because I thought it was very funny. How can you say that your strength is that your employees are very loyal and your weakness is that your employees are stealing from you? There's obviously some kind of issue there. So I had the students revise the interview questions and go back and do it in a more structured way. So you have to be really objective. You have to be really data driven. You have to be really rigorous. So a lot of the frameworks we use are really, really simple, and that's what makes them great. But because they're so simple, they're easy to use, but they're difficult to use very well. So you have to really push yourself to make sure that you're thinking critically and you're including everything, you're not missing something, and you're being objective and you're not being biased. So from SWOT, one strategy we can come up with is that we want to leverage our strengths and our opportunities while we protect against our weaknesses and threats. That's a common thing we do. one thing about SWOT that we see here, this is not a strategy. This is just a way of organizing the information we have so that we can look at it in a structured way. It's up to us to take what we learn and what we see from this analysis and use it to make a strategy. So a lot of students and a lot of businesses just kind of, they put the information into the framework and then they move on without doing the analysis, without drawing any insights. So you want to make sure you're going all the way through, not just filling in the boxes and moving on. And you don't want to fill in the boxes in a way that confirm what you already think it should be done, right? Because that would be bias as well. So the framework now, we start talking about market entry strategy. The framework we're going to use is just called 5 C's. So one thing is that there's a lot of frameworks that we could use. There's a lot of different ways to make a market entry strategy. It doesn't matter really what framework we use. We just want to make sure that we use one framework and we use it in the right way. So the framework I use is called 5 C's. It's very simple, and we'll talk about it one by one. We're just going to be super brief about each one of these. When I teach market entry strategy in my class, we spend the entire semester just covering 5 C's. So every week is a different one of these C's, and we're going to do it all in an hour. So it's going to be really brief. It's not going to be super detailed, but it's going to be a good start point for how to think about strategy and how to think about market entry strategy. So the 5 C's that we're looking at is first the company, second the country, third is the customer. Then we want to look at the competitor and the culture. And these go in order. You can't look at the competitors first and then look at the company. You have to go one by one through these steps, and you're going to use what you find in each analysis to inform the next analysis. So it goes step by step. This is a quote from Sun Tzu. Maybe you heard of him. He was like a Chinese military general, and he wrote a lot about strategy, and a lot of what he wrote about strategy is used by businesses today. So this is his quote. He said, "If you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the results of 100 battles." Usually we want to focus on the enemy, but it's just as important that we know who we are. So the first step in a market entry strategy is to look in the mirror and see who we are as a company and understand ourselves first before we move and look at the enemy. So company is about looking at our own company and what we're doing. And we can use SWOT analysis here as well. We can use a lot of different frameworks inside of this piece. So we have the overarching framework, and then within each C, we're going to use a different framework as well. So we can use SWOT analysis. We can look at different things. A really important thing we want to look at is the motives for exporting. Why do we want to export? Does anybody have any idea about some of the motives that we might have for wanting to export? Any ideas? To expand the business, to reach more customers. Branding is really important. Yeah, these are good answers. Get a new market. So the first thing I think that companies and students always think is that we want to get more revenue. We want to make more money, get more profits. That's really great, but it doesn't help us really make a strategy, right? Because it's pretty general. It doesn't help us make decisions. So we want to think deeper about our motives. Some motives might be about, you could imagine like a fashion company in Indonesia. Maybe they want to enter a market in Europe so that they can be close to where all the new styles and trends are coming from. You want to be close to where the innovation is happening. so you can easily absorb it and incorporate it into your business. In the same way, maybe you care about the branding. So maybe if you're very successful in Japan or in Italy, and you tell your customers in Indonesia that you're a well-known brand in Europe, that it's going to help your brand image here in Indonesia as well. Maybe you want to be close to where your suppliers are at. So you want to be in China. You want to have access to raw materials. These are all motives for why we want to export. Maybe you want to spread your risk, because if the Indonesian economy suddenly hits a recession and goes down, all of your business is going to go down. But if you're in other countries, you can kind of manage that risk. So if there's a recession in Indonesia, at least you still have a booming economy and a booming market in India that you can rely on. So these are all good motives for exporting. And you really want to look at why you believe you can succeed. So one of the questions you want to ask is like, why go to a new country rather than just focusing here in the domestic market? And if you don't have a good answer for that, maybe you're not ready yet to start exporting. But if you can answer it good, then it can help you. So our idea is that we want to draw some insights from our analysis. And the big thing we want to do is we want to filter out some of our countries. So we're not going to analyze all 250 whatever countries in the world. We're just going to look at a few of them. So how do we go from a huge number of countries in the world to just 3 or 5? And we use this SWOT analysis to say, okay, we want to be close to innovation in Europe. So we're going to choose the top 3 or top 5 markets in Europe to analyze. Or we want to be close to raw materials in Asia. And so we choose some Asian countries. Or we use our motives and our SWOT analysis to narrow down to a few countries. And so our next step is choosing one country. So we have a list of about 3 or about 5, usually is what I use. And you want to choose the best country to enter from this list of 5. So how do we know which is the best country that we're going to enter? I use a framework that's very simple. It just has 2 dimensions. It has value and it has feasibility. So we're going to analyze what the value of a country is, or a market. We're going to look at the feasibility. How easy or how difficult is it to enter that market? And we can use frameworks inside of these 2 dimensions to help us look at it better. So the value usually is, what is the total market size? What is the growth of the market? Is very important to us to kind of see if it's maybe a smaller market now, but it's growing very fast. It could be very attractive. It's about the attractiveness of the country. Feasibility is how easy or how difficult is it to enter the market. We can use frameworks like pestle analysis to look at the political, economic, social, technological, legal aspects of a country. But we can think about it very simple as well. We could think maybe we're looking at Singapore or we're looking at China as our countries. How do we choose which market we're going to enter? If we look at value, China is a very high value market. They have a huge population. It's a fast growing economy. They have a lot of, their spending power is increasing. There's like 1 billion people. Singapore only has about 5 million people. They have a high per capita purchasing power, but it's a small market. So the value is a bit lower in Singapore and high in China. So China is very attractive. But if we think about feasibility, China has a very low feasibility, and Singapore has quite a high feasibility. It's close by Indonesia. They speak English very well. The legal and political system is very open to foreign companies entering. So it's very feasible. China is a very low feasibility. The political system and the legal system is not accommodating. There's a lot of competitors. The language is difficult. The technology is totally different. They don't use Google. They don't use the e-commerce that we use. They don't use the social media that we use. So it's very difficult to enter the Chinese market. So usually there's a trade-off between value and feasibility. Usually really high value markets have low feasibility. If we think about China, Japan, US, it's very hard to be successful in those markets. And usually if they have a high feasibility, usually the value is a bit lower, because if the value is really high and the feasibility is really high, everybody will just enter that market and quickly take all the value there, and the value will go down, or the feasibility will go down because it's more competitive. So there's a trade-off between the two. And usually if we're a small company and we're just starting to go abroad, usually we focus on feasibility first. So we might choose Singapore over China just because it's going to be easier for us, and we can enter there first, gain experience, and then enter the harder market later. So we focus on feasibility first and value later. We don't want to low value, but if we have to make that choice, usually we're going to choose the feasible country first. So what a lot of companies do is they want to enter China, but they enter Hong Kong first, and they learn because it's higher feasibility. And you spend a couple of years learning about the market and getting experience, and then later you enter China from Hong Kong. So we're going to analyze all of our 3 to 5 countries. We're going to analyze their value. We're going to analyze their feasibility, all in the same way. And we're going to make our choice about which single country that we're going to target based on what we think is the best balance or whatever between value and feasibility. And again, it should match our motives. It should match our strengths and our weaknesses, whether we're going to tackle a harder country to enter or whether we're going to give up some value to enter a more easier country to enter. So after we choose our country, we want to look at the environment in that country. And we start by looking at the customers there. They could be very different than our customers in Indonesia. So we have to look at who are the most suitable, who are the most profitable customers to target. So even if we choose the same segment that we have in Indonesia, like students, maybe students in Singapore have very different habits and needs than students in Indonesia. So we want to think about the behavior of those customers and use it to influence our product. Maybe we make some changes to our product. If you look at McDonald's in Indonesia, it's very different than McDonald's in the US. They have different products. The pricing could be very different depending on our customers. The place where we sell our product and how we communicate to our customers is all going to be affected on who our customer is. So these 4 things in marketing, we call it the marketing mix, or the 4 Ps, which is product, price, place, promotion. And so we're going to use our market entry strategy to influence how we create our marketing mix for that country. But this step comes first. So segmentation is really important. I could spend a whole session just on this, and usually I do in my class. But the idea is that we want to group people that have similarities within the groups and differences between the groups. So we could think about age and income, and we could think about how students are different from retirees and different from executives. And the kind of product they're going to need is going to be different. Retirees, maybe they want it very simple, not a lot of features. Students maybe want certain features that that they can handle the technology better and understand and use the technology better, but they still don't need a ton of features because they can't afford those, that executives maybe want very specific features. They want to be able to customize the product. They're willing to pay more. So depending on the characteristics of your customer, it's going to affect the product and how you offer the product and how you communicate about the product. So that's just really quick. I'm not doing it justice, but that's about the idea of segmentation. So which segment you're going to target is going to affect who your competitors are. For instance, you're a food and beverage company. If you're targeting students, your competitors might be coffee shops and might be McDonald's. But if you're targeting executives, your competitors are going to be high-end dining, steakhouses, more, things like that. So you're not competing with everybody in the industry, you're competing within your segment. So it's really important that we choose our segment, because we get to choose who our segment is. It can be different than the segment that we target in Indonesia. We can target a different segment overseas, and that's going to affect who our competitors are. So next we look at our competitors, and we do this in a way to position our company and figure out how can we add value that our competitors don't. And we do that by understanding our competitors, understanding our customers, and understanding what they want and what they need, or understanding our competitors and looking at their activities and the way that they do things, and we do those things better than they do them. Again, it's really we're not spending enough time that you could actually do this analysis, but it's giving you an idea about how to think about it and how to approach it. So the important thing is that you don't want to just copy your competitors and create what is called a Me Too strategy. You don't want to just look at what they're doing and say, oh, they're successful and they're doing this. If I do the same thing, I will also be successful. It's a bad strategy. But a lot of companies do it because you think that we don't know the market that well. They must know it better than us. So they must make these decisions based on what is best for that market, and we just do the same thing as them. And that puts us head to head with our competitors. And usually when you're head to head, the only thing you can compete on is the price. And that's always bad for business. You don't want to compete on price because the price will just go down. You will lose, your competitor will lose, and the customer will get all the winnings. So it's better if you don't compete head to head. You compete in a space that's different from your competitors, and you do this by thinking about ways that you can add value that they don't add. How can you be different from them in a way that's valuable to your customers? Finally, we want to look at culture. And for a lot of students and a lot of businesses looking to expand internationally, they want to look at culture first. And culture is really important, and we have to consider it. But I think that it's not the first thing you should look at. You want to make your decisions based on your company analysis, choosing the country, your customers and your competitors. Do all of that first, and then look at culture as the last thing, to kind of make small changes where you need to adapt to the culture of the market that you're entering. But culture is going to impact everything. It impacts our human resource management. So if we're going to open up a branch in the new country and we're going to hire local employees, the culture is going to affect how we motivate them, how we work together in a team, how decision making is done. So culture is really important in the operations and the human resource management of a business, but it also affects our marketing, how we communicate to our customers, how we, convince people to buy our product, how customers use our product. It's all going to be impacted by culture. So how we think about how we work with each other, how we deal with authority, with an employee and a manager. It affects our status, where we stand within our society. It affects our values and our beliefs. And it affects how we deal with humor and symbolism. So I'm going to talk about it from a marketing perspective. We want to consider all of these things. But I'm going to talk about it from a marketing perspective, and specifically about marketing communication and advertising. How do we speak to our customers? How do we make a message that's going to resonate with our customers? And how do we engage with our customers in a way that's going to make them want to use our product? So when we think about culture, we can think about different dimensions. There's a framework that's called Hofstede cultural dimensions. Maybe you've heard about it. We're not going to go in deep detail about it, but there's, I believe, 5, maybe 6 dimensions. The first one is it's called power distance. So it's about how we deal with authority.
Recording in progress.
Being kind of silly and that way, and that's very accepted in that culture. Do you think that the advertisement on the left would be successful in Indonesia? Would it be acceptable to make an advertisement like that? Yeah, maybe not. It's not something you're going to see. You wouldn't see this advertisement here. It's not going to work very well because of the culture and the structure of society places such a high respect on older people. You're not going to use them in a humorous way. Culture affects whether we're going to communicate with our customers in a very direct way or an indirect way. And this is kind of, there's some overlap between a couple of dimensions here. So we won't get into the details, but some countries you have to be very direct. It's about how they deal with uncertainty and time and punctuality and things like that. So in Germany, everything is very direct and everything is very structured. They don't like uncertainty. They don't handle it well. They want a lot of information. So the advertisement on the left is from Germany. I don't know if anybody's worked with or knows Germans, but they're always on time. They're always very direct. They want all of the information. They don't handle when things are not very structured, right? So this is a toothpaste ad from Germany, and it's very direct. There's messages from doctors. There's scientific diagrams about how it affects your gums and your teeth and what it's going to do for you. It's not very appealing. It's not very attractive or luxurious. It's very scientific and it's very direct. If you use our toothpaste, this is what's going to happen. This is what the science tells us. This is what the doctors say. There's a close-up. This is the technology of our bristles on our toothbrush. Very direct. The advertisement on the right is very indirect. It's from Thailand. Does anybody know what this is advertising? What the product is? Or what the message is? So it's a picture of a needle. It's a sewing needle. Are they trying to sell sewing needles, do you think? So it's not an advertisement for sewing needles. So yeah, if you look in the bottom right-hand corner, it's the logo for Thai Airways. So it's an advertisement for airline, Thai Airways. What is the message that they're trying to communicate? Does anybody know? That the world is small. Why is the world small? Yeah. So the idea is that Thai Airways, this is good. Muhammad Ali said, flying with them is so efficient and cheap that the world is small. So it's about globalization. It's about the connections that can be made because of the airlines. It's saying that if you fly with us, the world will be so small and so accessible that it'll pass through the eye of a needle. It takes a little bit of work to figure out what the message is. This advertisement wouldn't work in Germany. They would, if Thai Airways was advertising in Germany, they would want to say, we have the latest Boeing aircrafts. They use this engine. We have this many departure points. We serve this many airports in the world. We fly, it takes us this amount of time to get somewhere. It would be very direct and very clear about what they do well, about their technology, about whatever else. But in this case, it's very symbolic. So this wouldn't work in Germany, but it works well in Thailand because they deal really well with indirect messaging and symbolism. So you can look at this and you can kind of understand. You get you don't get a deep meaning, but you get a feeling about the product and the company. Indonesia is somewhere between these two. It's not super direct like Germany, and it's not super indirect like Thailand, somewhere in between. So probably neither of these ads are very suitable for Indonesia. And you can have direct and serious, like the advertisement from Germany, or you could have direct and humorous. So like in the UK, the messaging is very direct and clear, but it's done in a humorous way, not in a serious way. And you can have indirect that can be done in different ways as well, depending on where the country falls in the quadrants of these two dimensions. Culture also affects why we buy certain goods and how we use certain goods, especially luxury goods. So there's a dimension in Hofstede called masculine and feminine. And it's not so much about your gender or how macho the country is. I think it's a part of that, but it's more than that. It's about how you respond to different things, how you work in a group, and we can compare that with power distance as well, how much hierarchy there is, and it will show us why people use luxury goods. So in the US is a fairly low power distance, but fairly masculine. And so in the US, they're going to use luxury goods to show off success. If you see somebody with a fancy car, or you see somebody with a big house, or you see somebody with a fancy watch like a Rolex, the idea people get is, wow, she must be successful because she has this or she has that. Wow, what did she do to be able to get that? So it's a symbol of success. It shows that you're successful. In the US, we don't really value people who have wealth but didn't earn it. We tend to think like, oh, they just have rich parents, and it's kind of a negative thing. If you feel like, oh, they have all this wealth but they don't have any success, we don't value that. But we look at somebody with wealth and we look at those symbols and we think in our head, oh, they must be successful because they have this stuff. In a country like Spain, it's more about status. So we see the advertisement from the US, it says a crown for every achievement. So it's about showing off your success. In Spain, it's about showing off your status. So this is a country with a high power distance. So it's very hierarchical, a very structured society with some people at the top and some people lower in the society, but it's less masculine. So it's not about, it's not as competitive as the US. It's more collaborative, for instance. But because of the high power distance, you want to show your place in the hierarchy within the culture. So if you have a lot of money, it gives you certain privileges and it gives you a status in the society. So it's not about success so much. It's just about your social status. So the advertisement just says a gold Rolex is a symbol. It's very simple. Just like, man, it's a symbol. So it's about people buy luxury goods to try and move up in the hierarchy of society. A country like Japan is very high power distance, but very masculine. So they're using luxury goods a lot, and they're using it for both status within society and to represent their success. So they care about both sides. A country like Denmark and Northern Europe are very on the feminine side and low power distance. They don't care about hierarchy. There's no people who are high in the society and people low in the society. Everybody wants to be viewed as equals. So they care about the function of the product. They want a very high quality product that's going to last for a long time. They don't want it to be flashy. They don't want to show off. If somebody looks like they're trying to show off, people look down on them. It's not something that people appreciate or like. So they want it more subtle. They don't want a gold watch. They want it leather. And they want it to show off function. So you have the advertisement about, this watch is so good that you'll be able to give it to your grandson later on. Like it will last for several generations. So that's something that's very valued in Denmark and Northern Europe. So that's about culture, and just looking from the advertising perspective. We could look at it from a lot of different perspectives. We could look at it deeper, but we just don't have the time. So this is just a quick overview of how to get started making a market entry strategy. So you want to look at all of these things. So just to kind of bring it all together and summarize everything, is that the first step in the strategy process is always very high level. It's about our vision, our mission, our values of our company. We want to make sure that all of our strategies align with the vision and mission of the company. If we could make a very great market entry strategy, but if it doesn't fit with the identity and mission of the company, it's not going to work out very well for us. It's not going to be who we are. So we always kind of look back to what our vision and mission and purpose is when we're making decisions, especially around strategy. And once we know that, then we can make our market entry strategy. So we start by looking internally at, our company, our strengths, our weaknesses, our history, our values. We think about our motives, why we want to export. Is it just to get more revenues, or is it about economies of scale? Is it about spreading risk? Is it about access to new customers or suppliers or resources or innovation? Then when we choose once we know about our company, we narrow down to around 5 or 3 countries. We analyze each country based on value and feasibility in order to choose the most promising country that gives us the value that we want, but also gives us the highest probability of success, so to not set ourselves up for failure. Then the rest of the analysis is focused just within that one country. So we look at our customers there, we choose who we're going to segment and target within that country. We look at the competitors that are there in that market, and we look at the culture and the way people behave and the way they view our product and things like that. Because one thing we see in the world, I think that I'm sure maybe you're aware of this as international relations students, if that's what you study. When we think about culture, I think the idea is that the world is globalizing more and more. And a lot of people think that it's making the whole world a lot more similar. But in fact, the cultures are not really changing that much. So even though we're using the same products, maybe we use an iPhone in the US or we use an iPhone in Indonesia, we're using the same products, we're using social media, but we're using them in different ways. So the way Indonesians use social media is very different than how social media is used in the US, or why social media is used in the West or in Japan. So we're using the same things, but we think about it and we value it differently and we use the things differently. So once we have our market entry strategy that's covering these 5 aspects, then we want to look to our marketing mix to make decisions about our product. Maybe we want to adjust our product to a different customer segment or to the purchasing power of people in that country. We limit the features because the customers don't need so many features, maybe, or maybe they're less acceptive of new technology, or maybe their purchasing power is lower. So we do that. Maybe we add features because they have a higher purchasing power and they need more features, right? We can change our product based on our competitors, based on the culture as well. We want to think about the price of our product. If you look at Coca-Cola in the US and Coca-Cola in Indonesia, in the US, a bottle of Coke is like $2. In Indonesia, it's about 40 cents. So it's not just about exchange rates, it's about the markets as well. And how you choose your pricing is going to be different in different markets. Even though the product is the same and maybe you're targeting the same segment, but they have different behavior, so you charge a different price. Next is about place. How are you going to distribute your product? Are you going to open your own store? Are you going to use a retailer? Are you going to use online? Are you going to, there's a lot of different choices you can make about the place where you sell it. Are you going to sell your product in the mall or in a shop, right? If you look at Apple, for instance, in the US, they have Apple Store, but when they go to other countries, they use third-party retailers. And that's a choice that they make based on their marketing mix. And finally, you want to ask about the promotion. How are you going to communicate with your customers? So this is going to be influenced by the culture, about whether you're going to be very direct with them or you're going to use indirect and symbolism, whether you're going to show how your product will increase their status or show off or appeal to their success or neither of those, right? So you use the market strategy to influence your marketing mix, and then you go into make all those smaller decisions, but you want to make sure they all align to what you've decided in these 3 phases. When you decide, am I going to direct export? Am I going to joint venture? All of like the export mode, we call it, things like that. You can make all of those decisions and you're going to refer back to your plan and your strategy to make sure that everything is consistent and everything supports each other. So that's, I think, the end of my presentation. I'm open for any questions.
Okay. For all the students, you may ask the questions or give some opinions regarding to the materials given by Mr. Michael. Please, you may use the raise hand feature, and I will ask the PIC to unmute you. So the first is belongs to Muhammad Ali Farhan. The PIC, please ask his microphone to be unmuted. Okay.
Okay, so first of all, thank you very much for the lecture. It is very informative. Even though I don't really know much about business, but it's really interesting for me. Well, as I was paying attention to the SWOT, the SWOT strategy, I thought about this. In the current market situation, or maybe in the 21st century, like the idea of business is, in my opinion, is very bizarre right now. So maybe so I actually have 2 questions. So the first one is maybe this is not really technically business, so to say, but maybe you've heard about NFT, or the non-fungible token, which is like, it's been empowering small artists so they can they can sell their art and etc. But it is also, like, in my opinion, the smartest like a social construct, if I do say so myself, the smartest, but it's also like one of the, I don't know, like the most bizarre in my opinion. So like a very good artist can make a mural of maybe like a political commentary or something, and they can sell that and they can have value on that art. But a person can just make like the lowest minimum effort on the art, probably like I've read was that one of them just take a picture of their lower body parts and then make a pixelated and then sell it as a token. But because they're very successful and they're very have a very large influence, it's sold for like, I don't know, $1 million. So in your opinion, in terms of those kind of modern business like NFT or maybe like a digital business, do you think that those kind of strategies are still going to be relevant in the future? And my second question is, this is going to be a little bit on the traditional business side. So I do follow a little bit like news on the computer hardware because I am a computer enthusiast myself. And so like recently, I think around August, so like some of the component manufacturers, especially on SSDs manufacturer, they like change some of their part in the SSD that while doesn't necessarily gonna make them different in the first purchase, but it will degrade much more faster. And it's basically a lottery. Like there is no revision, there is no some kind of, oh, this is revision 1.0 with maybe like the flash from this company, or maybe the revision 2 is from other supplier companies. So in your opinion, in order to like maintain business in scarcity of supplies, especially during the chip shortages, do you think that those kind of, in my opinion, unethical practice is necessary, so in the future that, oh, maybe the supply has been restored and then we can resume business as usual? Those are my questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alif. That's a very, very good questions. Yeah, let me take it one by one. So first of all, I'll say that I don't know a whole lot about NFTs. I don't know how they work or why they work or who wants them. And that could be for a variety of reasons. It could be that they're not made for me. So when we think about like customer segmentation and we think about value, we always look at something and we think about, does it have value for me? And then I judge whether it's a good product or a bad product. But sometimes it's not about me. It's about somebody else, some other group of customers who are different from me. And the company is targeting them and their wants and their needs, and they're ignoring mine. Because you can't make everybody happy. So I think they found with NFTs that they do have value for some people. Some people are finding value in them. Some of it I think is speculative, that people think that they're going to turn into something that like later on in the future, they're going to have a purpose and a function and a use that they don't have today. That's sort of my very basic understanding, is that some people, it's very speculative, like Bitcoin or cryptocurrency. People are buying it today thinking that in the future it will have additional value, maybe because it has additional function or use for exchange or something like that. So some of it is speculative, I think. And people are just buying it in hopes that the value will increase in the future. And it may or may not. But there's other reasons, I think. So just to kind of generalize it so we can think about anything, I think that it's important to think about the customers, not just ourselves, about what they value and what is important to them. Because you can find an opportunity like that, even if it's not something that is important to everybody or to yourself. Even if you find that opportunity to deliver some kind of value to people that is not already there, you can. The question I have about this is like our initial discussion about strategy, like, will this last in the future? And a big thing is that, well, it is new and it is different, and it seems to be creating some value for some people. But is there something about it that what is keeping everybody from doing this? What is keeping it unique? What is keeping it from being copied? And I think that's a big part of whether it will be sustainable or whether it's just like a short-term trend. It's about, if anybody can make anything into an NFT, it seems like the market would get saturated pretty quick. And then I don't know how you differentiate value between the different NFTs. I don't really understand. So that's just a way to look at it. And to be honest, I don't know enough about it to make any claims about whether I think it'll be successful in the future or not. But I think that, it gives us a way to kind of look at it and think about it so that we can make those judgments for ourselves. I think speculative is always risky, to think that if the only reason you're buying it is because you think it will increase in some value in the future, but you're not really that sure about where that value is going to come from or why it's going to increase. I tend to stay away from those kind of things. Some people just love the risk and they do it. But I'm not. I want to see the source of the value. Your other question was about, technology and hardware and how, I think to kind of generalize it again, because I don't know enough about the specifics of that industry. But if we kind of generalize it, we can look at industry and industry structure and see about how you can treat your customers. Because we always say like the customer is the most important and the customer is always right and you should always be serving the customer. But it's actually more true in some industries than in other industries. If you look at your cable or your internet provider, customer service is not very important to your internet provider. I think that's clear to all of us. And I think everywhere in the world it's true. And why is it? It's because it's very hard to switch to another provider. There's only a few of them. So they're not fighting each other to provide the best service. They're all just providing mediocre, moderate service at a high price. And they have all the power over the customer. So they don't do a whole lot to make the customer happy because it's not very competitive. So there's different things that affect those kind of those powers, right? And the customers have power and the suppliers have power. And if there's a lot of substitutes, that gives it power. And if people can easily enter and make a new business and compete against you, that affects the power. And so if you have like chips and these kind of technologies, it seems like the companies the industry is structured in a way that gives the companies more power over their customers. And whether that's ethical or not, I don't know. I think it depends. I think if you're a business person, you have to think about your values and as well. But usually I would say certain industries attract certain personalities and certain types of people. Like if you really care a whole lot about, I don't know. I think you have to make those decisions for yourself about what your values are. And then you have your shareholders as well who want to see higher profits, and you're trying to balance short-term and long-term. But I think the structure of the industry determines a lot of that, about so you have there's a certain cap on the value that you create, and you share that value between your suppliers and your customers, and it's kind of spread out. So how much, if you get 30% of the value and the customer gets 70% of the value, maybe you're fine with that. But if you can get 50% of the value, you're going to take that and the customer is going to lose some. And I think that's what's happening in these industries, is that the companies have the power to keep the value that they create for themselves rather than sharing it with the customers. So that's what they do until something changes that structure through new technology, regulation, different other factors could change that structure. So hopefully that answers your question. I think
Yes, thank you. That was a very insightful answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Muhammad Ali Farhan, for the questions. And we may now move to Chantika Khairunisa for the PIC. Please unmute her microphone. Chantika, are you there?
Yes, hello. Is my voice can be heard?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon, Mr. Michael, and all the committees and participants as well. I apologize in advance because I'm unable to turn on my camera due to network issues. I'm Chantika from Diponegoro University, majoring at International Relations, and I would like to ask a question. So from your lecture, one of the internal factors in SWOT strategy or SWOT strategy is strength factor. And I noticed it mentioned about the low cost labor. And of course, every company would consider that. But lately, there have been many cases of labor exploitations, like low wages for them, no benefits for the workers, and many other cases as well. So my question is, how to minimize or even eradicate those phenomena, and how, from the company's perspective, we still consider this as a strength, yet still respecting the labors. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chantika. It's a very good question. Yeah, and I think it's especially important for international relations and now, yeah, business is it affects all aspects of our lives, and there's we want to hold businesses to a higher standard and a higher responsibility than maybe has been done in the past. And I think that when it comes to things like labor practices and things like that, it seems that most of the pressure is coming from consumers and customers and what they demand. And in recent years, consumers have become more vocal and put more pressure on companies to have more ethical and responsible practices. So I think that's really where it starts. But yeah, I think that there's a lot of different ways to deal with that. I think that part of it is a responsibility of governments and regulation, which is challenging because there's this idea about like a race to the bottom. If you think about developing countries, for instance, they want the investment from foreign companies, so they try to attract them by lowering regulations and lowering taxes and lowering all these things, but it doesn't help them in terms of development and economic development and raising the standard of living and avoiding things like child labor and exploitation. So I think it's a challenging thing for governments and something they have to think about, because if you have Indonesia competing against Cambodia and Indonesia enacts higher labor standards and labor laws, then the companies will just go to Cambodia or go to Myanmar or somewhere else that has lower standards. So there is this kind of pressure on government to keep those regulations low. I think it takes coordinated effort between, maybe ASEAN agreements that all ASEAN agrees that they're going to have certain labor standards so that they're not competing those regulations low. So I think, yeah, I think it comes from consumer pressure and what we demand from companies in terms of their standards as consumers, not just what we say, but actually how we spend our money. So if we find out that companies have poor practices, we don't just complain about it, we actually don't spend our money there. And then government should be involved, and then companies as well. I think that a lot of companies are getting more involved, especially around supply chain management. So a lot of these standards, if you look at the responsibility, if you look at a company like Apple or Nike, and they say like, oh, we have high standard, we don't have any problems, but it's actually their suppliers and their contractors that have poor standards. I think now there's a lot more pressure on companies to have more transparency in their supply chain, and more responsibility for their contract companies and suppliers. So and oversight and things like that, because if the supplier or manufacturer is having poor labor practices, it's going to affect the brand, even if it's not within their company, for instance. And I think that you have pressure from NGOs and things like that, but I don't think it's an easy solution. I don't think I have a answer to give you about how to eradicate poor labor practices from the world. I think it takes a coordinated effort from all of these actors, and hopefully business helps in terms of economic development and standard of living and things like that, rather than hurts it in the future. But yeah, it's good that as an international relations student, it's something that you're thinking about. And I think business students should be thinking about it as well. And we should all be thinking about the kind of world we want to live in and how we can contribute to that. So it's a good question. Sorry, I don't have a better answer for a solution.
No, that's okay. Thank you very much for the insightful answers.
Thank you so much for the questions. And now we're going to move to Anissa Antania Hanjani. You may have your screen now.
Thank you very much for the moderator, and thank you so much for the insightful session, Mr. Tuori. My question is actually about culture and business itself. I know that there is a product that has a sensitive value, and the example that I can give you is batik. Although batik now is a very global product and it is introduced everywhere, there is some debate that the introduction of batik in global world as a business itself makes the sensitive value of batik become lesser and lesser, because actually there are some motifs in batik that can only be used by the royal family or not by the just ordinary people like us, and thus it makes the artist of batik becomes very concerned on it. But I can understand that making batik global is and having it as a global business invasion is actually one of effort to conserve the batik itself. So how can we bridge it actually? Thank you.
Thanks, Anissa. It's a very good question. And first, I think maybe just to talk about the business side of batik and use it as an example for a market entry strategy before answering your question, because I think there's a lot of batik small businesses that want to export their products, and at least at BNUS, a lot of students kind of choose this as a topic for exporting. It's a very good example of you have a market in Indonesia that's very mass market. Everybody wears batik, and everybody it's a very common thing. It's very usually the price is quite low, or there's a lot of variety, but it's a very common and mass market product. But when you go abroad, it's going to be very niche. So the marketing and the strategy you use is going to be totally different, because maybe you're going to export to the Netherlands, so you're going to target Indonesians living in the Netherlands, or the diaspora of Indonesians there, which is a very small percent of the population. Or maybe your target, it'll still be very niche of people who are going to accept batik as a new style. And so you have to think about all the differences. You can't just sell batik in the Netherlands like you sell it here in Indonesia. So I think it's a good example of how you really need to adapt your strategy and your marketing when you go to a new country from Indonesia. About your question, I think it's very interesting, and it's something that I think about a lot, because I myself, I collect these kind of things. So not so much batik. I'm interested in some batik, like from Jambi, they have basurek, I like. But I collect tenun kain from Sumba, from Timor, from Kalimantan, all of these kind of, they use natural dyes, they use ikat, they use songket. So I'm very familiar with these textiles from Indonesia, just from personally, I just collect them. And there is this question about the cultural importance of the object of batik. It's done in a very specific way, or these textiles in Sumba or Timor have a very specific ritual purpose in adat. And as you start to market those things, they start to lose the quality, for instance, because if you make it, you're making it for a royal or a ritual purpose, you have to follow very strict standards in the quality. But if you're trying to sell it to tourists, you're going to dilute the quality, you're going to adapt to their taste. So you'll see textiles in Sumba made with motifs from Kalimantan or Toraja mixed in with Sumbanese motifs. And so there's this question: is it degrading the cultural heritage by kind of producing these things for export or for tourists or for more mass market? And it's a difficult question, because you have people within the culture who use these textiles or other whatever it is, and the importance, I think, because of globalization and things, the importance that is placed on these things within the cultures and within the rituals is kind of going down for whatever reason. And then people with the skills, they need to make a living as well, and so they might find they can make more money by mass producing things cheaper, or cutting corners or things like that, but they need it to support their livelihood. So I think the question becomes about how do we protect the cultural heritage and make sure that these traditions continue and that the knowledge is preserved, but without trying to cut people off from making a livelihood at the same time. And I think people have been producing batik for tourists and textiles for tourists and art for tourists since colonial times. Like it's not a new discussion that we're having. It's been going on for a long time. So I think the important thing is that we really involve the communities and that they get a say in how specifically their culture is preserved, and we kind of balance the market with the culture, and try and find a way that we can do both well, that we can make sure that the indigenous knowledge is retained, but that people can make a living as well. And I think there's a variety of ways that we can do that. But I think it's an interesting and challenging question. But yeah, I think community involvement is kind of the best place to start, to go to Jogja and Solo and Sumba and Timor, and figure out how they want to, what the local communities want to do, in terms of their cultural heritage, while thinking about the bigger picture. Hopefully that kind of answers your question a little bit.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Tuori. It's actually very enlightening.
I think when it comes to most of these things, I mean, I don't have any answers or any wisdom. I think it's just about thinking about how we think about things, and how we frame things, and how we're able to come to our own conclusions. Yeah, so I don't have a lot of direct answers for any of these questions, but I think it's a good discussion to have, and a good thing that we need to be thinking about. So thank you, Anissa.
Thank you, sir. It's very good to see you here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Anissa and Tania. And now we may move to Sandra Natani Wijaya. Sandra Natani Wijaya, you may have your turn now.
Oh yeah, okay, so my name is Sandra. I study tourism at Udayana University. So as we do know that there is a ban or war, I would say, between China and the USA. So basically China could not export things to the USA because the USA would not import from them anymore. Please correct me if I'm wrong. So the impacts are not only circling around both countries, but also other smaller countries that export goods to China. For example, New Zealand's wool that before could be exported to China from China to the USA, but the ties have been cut. So realistically, New Zealand got problems about the wool stocks. What strategies do you think that could be implemented to this case that works for similar cases as well? Because again, political situations is one of the external factors that we cannot control. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Sandra. It's very good question. I'll have to put some thought into it. But yeah, like you said, I think it's one of the external factors. So so it's something that these sudden changes we just react to. We can't be as proactive about it. But it's kind of, it's one of the political risks and that we should consider. So one of the strategies is just why we want to be exporting and expanding to different countries anyways, is to just kind of manage our risk. Because if we're only exporting only to China, and we're relying on their relationship with the US, and then that disappears, all of our business disappears. But if we're more diversified and we're in a lot of countries, we're exporting to Europe and to Asia and to North America, then if one of those goes down, we have some other areas that can help us survive while that's going on. So I think that diversifying that risk is really important. And then yeah, I don't think I have much kind of direct suggestions about specifically what companies can do during the trade war. Yeah, I think it's one thing about strategy is that it's all very contextual. There's never just one strategy that works, because if it did, there would be no strategy at all. You just do that thing and then you win. So it's very contextual between the industry and the company itself and the goals. So I think that's why there's never very clear answers about, oh, you should do this or you should do that, because it all depends on the context that you're in. But there's definitely, I think, a lot of companies that are caught in between in that trade war, like Indonesia, who is not part of that conflict, but they're just kind of stuck in the middle. So it is unfortunate. And I'm sure that there's things that companies could do. I just don't have any really clear answers, I think, at the moment for specific actions. Yeah, but thank you, Sandra. I think it's a good discussion as well to have.
Okay, Sandra Natani Wijaya, do you have any feedbacks?
Yeah, no. Because it's a hard case actually. So yeah, we should discuss more, but not only like one answer, I guess.
Yeah, all the questions have been very good and very complex and very difficult. They're not new questions, I think. It's something that we're always thinking about. How do we deal with political disturbances and disruptions, and how do we deal with new technology, and how do we deal with ethical and labor standards, and how do we deal with market forces impacting cultural or societal forces. They're all very, very old questions that we've been trying to answer for a long time. So I think as students, they're really good things to think about, and think about how you can contribute to the solutions, and what your own values are, because all of our values are different, and how you would approach certain situations if you could, because maybe if you're an international relations student, you'll become a politician who will have to decide a position in these trade wars, or decide how you protect industries or regulate or deregulate. So I think that thinking about our own personal values, I think, plays a big role in business and politics and all of these things as well. So I think that a big part of it is understanding ourselves and what we would do in these situations, right? Because there's not just a clear answer to any of this.
Sandra Nathania, do you have probably more feedbacks?
Yeah, no, it's good.
Thank you, Sandra.
I let others to have their questions answered. Yeah, no, I don't have it. I don't have any feedback.
Thank you.
So the answer is clear enough?
Yeah, totally.
Okay, thank you so much, Sandra Natani Wijaya, for the questions. And now we may move to the next one. Rosana Argandari, you may have your turn now.
Okay, so thank you for the moderator and for Mr. Michael Tuori. So actually, I don't know about the strategy in business, but every company has their purpose rights. the possibilities is to make a good brand, also the good marketing fellows. For example, it's real happened at previous time. So the McDonald's, the restaurant from US, was collab with one boy band from South Korea. It's called BTS. But at that time, the brand called Butter is more famous in the US than the South Korea, and it's famous in Indonesia than the South Korea itself. Meanwhile, the South Korea is protected the music and the BTS itself. Like everyone wants to buy the butter brand itself from the McDonald's. So my question is, what is the relations can give that the biggest impact to the US citizen or to the other country? And what is the values industry strategy to make the most interested customer like that? Thank you.
Thank you, Rosanna. Yeah, I remember when this happened with BTS. Could you just say your question one more time about?
Okay, so my question is, what is the values industry strategy to make the biggest impact? Like BTS can have international global issues to make the famous brand like McDonald's in this world.
Okay, so the question is more about marketing strategy and how to make a successful marketing strategy like that.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I think that there's many things that go into it, but I think that asking yourself a lot of the things that we discussed today is important, especially about your customer. If you can understand who your customer is and what they value, then you can create interesting marketing campaigns for them. And you have to understand the culture and everything as well. And it's really interesting, I think, about the customer segmentation and thinking about who specifically you're talking to, because you're not going to make everybody happy. Because you had I think it was Shopee, right, that did advertisements with Blackpink, and I think that they were very successful, but they got a lot of backlash and criticism in Indonesia as well because of the way the dancers performed and things like that. So you have to think, like, who are you trying to appeal to with your advertisement? And with a case like Shopee with Blackpink, maybe that controversy actually helps you even more so that more people hear about it. And even though people are mad, it's actually good for your company as well. So you really have to think a lot about who you're trying to make happy and who you're trying to speak to, and kind of ignore. By doing that, you kind of ignore some people. Trying to make everybody happy will always be a disaster, I think. Or you just have if you're trying to speak to everybody at the same time and make everybody happy, you have no direction, you have no identity, and you're never going to be able to do that. So I think knowing who you're trying to reach and being able to measure whether you're doing that well or not, and kind of evaluate your success objectively is really important. I don't know if I'm getting at the root of your question or not. Is that kind of what you're asking, or is there something more specific I should be thinking about?
Yes, I'm just thinking that why that brand more famous in the US than South Korea itself? Like, what happened with it? What is the strategy itself? Maybe there is a reason.
Yeah, I'm sure there's a reason. I'm not so familiar with the specifics of the K-pop um, but I think that K-pop and Korean entertainment is a great case study for how to internationalize, because they've done a very good job at having their movies and TV series and music very popular everywhere in the world, in Asia and the US and Europe and everywhere. I haven't looked too much into how they've been able to do that, but I'm sure there's things that are written about it, and I'm sure people have analyzed that. So if you look for it, I'm sure it's there. Sorry, I don't have enough knowledge about exactly what was done. But I think it's when we get back to kind of the root about how to do this, one thing that we can do is we come up with those kind of questions, and then we look into it and see, what we can discover. So so it's a great starting point, a great question to ask. Then it's just about doing that kind of research to find out what was done, how we could do something similar like that. So I think it's the right approach and the right question to ask. I just don't have the experience with that specific case.
I think it's enough. Probably I will search about it more and to learn the other culture in the other countries. Thank you, Mr. Michael Tuori, for the answer.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Michael, is it okay for you to extend the sessions up to 5 minutes since we have 2 more questions on the chat box?
Yeah, it's okay.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, it's fine.
Okay, let me read it first, yeah. The first question is from Sharifatul Latifah, our committee here. Thank you so much, Mr. Tuori, for the insightful materials. I want to ask the questions. Analyzing customer in a country is not an easy job to do, especially for the small business enterprises in which they probably haven't had particular teams specialized in business research. So do you have any solutions to that? Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah, this is a great question. And it's a good thing to bring up. So I think that there's a lot of things that small businesses can do when they're entering a new country to make it easier. So the first thing you want to do is reduce the differences between your country and the country you're entering. So it's a part of the feasibility analysis. So you want to choose countries to enter that are more similar like your country. So maybe they have similar language, or they're not far geographically, or they have similar cultural dimensions. They have good political relations and legal systems. So you could think about a country like Malaysia or Philippines that has a lot of similarities. So you're not dealing with as much differences. You don't have to adapt to as much differences. The other thing you can do is you just want to start small and work your way from there. And you can make mistakes and you can fail. You just want to minimize your failures. So you don't want to, if you want to enter sorry, I don't know what happened. Yeah, so you can start small and you can fail. So maybe you start by just exporting. You don't immediately open a new branch or factory. Uh, maybe you target a small group of customers and you do like pilot projects and you learn. And if they don't accept your product, then you can figure out why, and you can kind of make changes as you go. So the big thing about market entry strategy is that it doesn't have to be perfect. And you can make mistakes along the way, and you can learn, and you can adapt, and you can get better as you gain information. So it's not like you set up everything first and then you execute fully. Is that you can set up a series of small experiments and learn as you go, and so you can change. So there's things like that idea about your ultimate goal is to be successful in China, but your first step is to be successful in Hong Kong, because it's easier and you can learn before you enter it. So you can have a big goal and you can have small goals along the way to kind of set up and learn and adapt and kind of go step by step, little by little into the country. Hopefully that answers the question a little bit.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Michael. Now we have one more questions from Pratama Indra. He sent me a private chat. Hello, Mr. Michael. I'm sorry I cannot turn on my camera since I'm on my way right now. I want to ask you about the market entry strategy. You have mentioned an example of Coca-Cola that changed on several aspects due to the demand in Indonesia that is different from America. About that, how do we really know how to work together with the locals in this particular country, and how to really gather the knowledge from this country that we are going to get it? Thank you so much.
Okay. So the example with Coca-Cola was about the price, right? So I just want to clarify about the question, because there was kind of a couple different things. There was about the adapting to the local market and the customers, but also working together with people in a new country. Mega, could you kind of summarize the main point of the question?
The point of his question is actually about how we do really know how to work together with the locals in that particular country, and how to really gather the knowledge from this country that we are going to get in. So basically, to sum up the questions, is he asks about how we can gather the information regarding to the country as the first, and the second is how do we really know if we could work together with the locals for this case. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's a good question. So when it comes to like Coca-Cola and McDonald's, who are adapting, you have McDonald's and Coca-Cola who are adapting and changing their product, and you want to know how much you want to adapt your product to the market. There's actually like a series of questions you can ask. I don't have them right away, but you can think of it certain dimensions about whether you should really standardize and mass market your product, whether you should really customize and adapt to every market, whether you should do something in between. There's a set of like rules and questions you can follow about that. I wish I had it in front of me. I could tell you what they are. But yeah, you can look at characteristics of your business and the industry and the market and make those decisions about Are you going to make small changes? Are you going to make really big changes? Are you going to just make changes to advertising and marketing, but not the product? There's like structure that you can follow for that. When it comes to working with people and kind of entering the market, it's kind of the same advice as before. You can do it step by step. So you can start by just doing like indirect exporting, where you have like you work together with an import agent who handles all of the distribution, about finding retailers, for instance, that's going to carry your product or where it's going to be sold. You just sell it to the agent, and the agent can handle all of that. And then as you learn, you can build more relationships. So you don't have all of the relationships with all of the customers. So you just build one relationship with an agent, and they have those relationships. But over time, you can make those relationships yourself, and you can enter kind of slowly into the market. And that's what we see happening a lot. There's a lot of products in Indonesia that I've seen kind of slowly enter the market over time. Like when I first moved here, there was no Doritos, for instance, the chips. And then I started to see it in kind of high-end grocery stores for a high price, and they weren't produced here in Indonesia. They were imported in from, I think, China or Thailand. And you would see them for very expensive in like Ranch Market or these high-end supermarkets. And then finally you have like a local production of Doritos, and now you find it in Indomaret and everywhere. So you can do it. Even a very large corporation and a large brand like Doritos can do it very slow process of market entry to kind of slowly learn and gather information and build relationships. And you can do that slowly over time. So if you're a small business, start small and limit complexity and limit differences, and go with what's easiest first, even if it's not the most profitable or it's not your ultimate goal. You can do small goals in between and kind of work your way up to something big. So hopefully that answers the question.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Michael. And I think we have no question left. And before we go to the next activity, you may give your closing remarks or how you want to do it, or it's enough.
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for all the students for listening and participating. Thank you, Mega and Undip, for having me here. I think it was a very interesting and insightful session, and I was happy to be part of it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Michael, for the insightful sessions. It is really worthwhile sessions for us here. And after this, we're going to take the photo sessions with Mr. Michael and all the students. So please, for all the students, you may turn your camera on, and for the operator, you may take the lead of these photo sessions. So I think I'm going to take the lead of these photo sessions. This is for the first slide. 1, 2, 3. And the second sessions. 1, 2, 3. For the third sessions, for the third layers. 1, 2, 3. And the last layer. 1, 2, 3. Okay. It's done. And thank you so much, Mr. Michael, for the sessions. And for all the students, You may go back again at 3 p.m. for the gastro diplomacy class with Miss Stephanie Dembrond. And now you may leave this room. Thank you so much, Mr. Michael, and all the students. Have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Mike.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sabrika.
Mr. Michael, if you want to leave the sessions now, it's very okay, Mr. Michael.
Okay. Thank you. Hopefully it went well.
Thank you, Pak Mike. We'll see you
Yeah,
soon.
thanks. Bye.
Have a nice day, Mr.
Bye.
Recording stopped.